Jenesee, and you're here listening to my talk, Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. Hopefully, you've been enjoying the conference. I know I have. It's kind of awesome to sit here and listen to everybody talk about all their expertise in subjects that we probably don't get to hear a lot of people sharing in. But if you've tuned into my talk and you've seen the title, you can bet that there's going to be some more awful pop culture references and terrible puns. So fair warning, you asked for it. So when we talk about community, we most often think about external communication, usually between a game studio and its fans and customers. And there are some great talks during the conference about this sort of thing and focusing on social media, focusing on just ads and things of that nature. So we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about something that isn't often addressed. So what we don't often talk about is how your community department and other departments should ideally collaborate together to get the best results from all of your strategy. So whether you're running a self-funded project or you're working with a publisher, hopefully this session will improve your community engagement, show how you can contribute to your success, and most importantly, tell you what not to do. Now, when people think about community, and that I'll explain what that means in detail a little bit, because I'm kind of using that word as a larger piece, which includes some other things. But when you think about community, the community department, if you're lucky enough to have a department, you might think, okay, well, why would they need to talk to other departments, especially internal facing departments like publishers or like, production. So we're going to kind of go over that too, and why it's important to not silo your different departments. And this applies not just to community, but to the marketing department, to the publishing department, how it's better overall if you have more of an open communication, which is kind of counter to a lot of things you're going to see in especially larger, more corporate level companies. So before we jump in too far, I'd like to say that this is more of an interactive talk. I'm not a lecturer per se, I'm more of a live streamer. So it helps me to have more of a dialogue between you and me. And so if you have questions, I would love to hear them. I'm going to break this up into two different sections, kind of by department. I don't want you to have to wait a full hour-ish to really ask your questions about the beginning section. By then, we'll all have forgotten what we were talking about. So there'll be a section here where you can ask your questions. So if you have them, throw them up in there, and the lovely people behind the scenes will be grabbing them for you. So the purpose of this whole thing and why we're here today is to educate and kind of address your needs without me jabbering at you for this whole hour. So I'm going to focus on the departments, and then we're going to talk about that. So watch this space. Go ahead and add your questions if you have them. Now, we talked a little bit about those caveats and definitions. So like all drug commercials everywhere, I'm going to add some of these warnings and clarifications. I'm not going to speed up at the end to talk about them really quick, but there are some here. So for my purposes, community is a term that's going to encompass efforts like forums, live discussion platforms, Discord, in other words. And social media efforts are going to be places that are more like informational blasts, right? Like Twitter, Facebook, etc. So in a perfect company, these are separated. They require overlapping but separate skill sets. I know that is somewhat controversial, and usually in smaller companies, they're kind of joined together and one person does it. But I like to call my department communications when I have those two separated. But since many places do combine these, I'm just going to call them community with a capital C for the purposes of this discussion. So try not to get confused when I say the word community versus the community, and hopefully you can hear that capital C when I'm talking about it. So there is a day that will probably address the division here, but as they say in Lord of the Rings, today is not that day. Community teams do, as you know, multiple tasks: content creation, asset creation, QA, customer service, influencer relations, streaming, as well as advertising and analytics. So basically, the next time that someone says to you, oh, it's just posting a pic on social media, please slap them for me, really. And all of this might not apply to your team. So since there's really no structural matrix for any studio, we're all different. We don't have any kind of like repeatable format. Some of these tasks may or may not apply to your community department. So your mileage may vary on some of these topics depending on your departmental makeup. So we're going to talk about, here we go, these 3 departments. And I think the one that we're going to focus on first is production, right? Because people are going to say, oh, production, that's an internal department. It doesn't have any external communications. It's really geared towards making things work. It doesn't really focus on sales per se. It doesn't focus on how the game is received. It's really focusing on creating the game and being that sort of technical creator. So why is that important for a community to be discussing with? So if we start here, so in the beginning, where things are created, this is the publishing department, and God said, let us fund a game. And about 1.5 years later, it was ready to be presented to the world. So we're going to go over these various aspects of the game's life cycle and how production and community interact during those particular points. So we're gonna go on each one of these milestones. So little production publishing joke for you there. But for announcement, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about beta demo. For the purposes of this discussion, it's just good to include a test of some sort. So we're just gonna call that beta demo, happening before the release date, and the gameplay trailer. Usually in a lot of places I've worked before, the release date trailer and the gameplay trailer are tied together, just kind of in that announcement. And then of course the launch, so a big one. So another thing for me is I have worked in places that are a 10-person studio all the way up to a 100-person studio. And there's a big difference between interacting with these departments. If you're just looking over to your right and Bill is the producer, right? Bill's the producer and he's got one thing versus an entire department of Bills that are handling all of this. So keep that in mind when we're kind of going over this. Some of this is going to be a little easier depending on where you work, and some of it is going to be a little bit harder. So let's go over the announcement here and the subjects that we're going to talk about. Yes, the announcement is super exciting. Okay. So before a game is announced, hopefully significantly before, a community strategy needs to be created. So basically you need to go over, what are we going to do with this game? How are we going to present it to the community? What channels are we going to be using? All those sorts of things. And a lot of this is going to be based, at least the timing of it, is going to be based on when certain gameplay elements are expected to be ready for public view. Now, sometimes the way different departments work is that the marketing lead or the project lead, which is often marketing, is the person who disseminates all this information. However, I find it really tough for that person to be the point of contact for every single thing like this, because it slows down communication between you and production. And sometimes having that middleman means that things get lost, right? Now, when we're talking about things that are ready to be seen for a public view, this doesn't mean that they're completely polished and in this perfect state, it just means that they're able to be shown in a carefully curated way, right? So we're going to assume for the purposes of this talk that the point of announcement to launch is going to be 6 months. Now we all know that this is often more than 6 months, but for the purposes of this, we're going to call it 6 months. So communicating with production is essential for the community department to map out each important aspect of the game in a themed content calendar. So if production knows, okay, like this month that this mechanic will be completed, or by this month we will have voiceover into the game, or by this month, we're going to have final skins for X, right? That's all really important for a community to know when they're creating this master calendar that's going to go out hopefully for the whole year, right? I like to work in themed blocks like story reveal, character reveal, mechanics breakdown, X thing in action, etc. right? And so for this type of information, community is going to need to talk to the person who's running the roadmap of when things are going to be created. And so that's why it's really important for these two departments to have that kind of communication. So with production on board, the info on these different elements is ready for its close-up when it's actually ready available, and the status of each of these elements is going to be really clear. Also, let's be real. It gives you somebody on the inside a chance to laugh with them when your carefully created content calendar is blown away in the first month, because we all know that something is going to shift in production, and everything that we're planning is going to shift wildly in the way it goes. So. Knowing that you have this connection with production allows you to flip your content calendar fairly easily when things are reordered from the production department perspective, right? You can reslot them. That's why I like to do things in blocks, because I can move them around like Legos and continually back them up ad nauseum, right? So let's go over this do. Well, let me do branches first. So do work together to share your content timelines, right? So if they know that you're planning to talk about X thing and you're planning to share it, 2 months after the announcement, it's great, because then they can tell you, oh, guess what? There's no way that's going to be done. So you can flip around things that you can share when you need to share them. Now we're going to talk about branches and playing. So assuming that you're working, I'm most used to working on games on PC. We've done some console games before, and that creates a whole different discussion point. So we're going to pretend that this game is on the PC, right? And let's just say it works too on Epic, but let's just say it's on Steam. So it's really important for, especially if your community is responsible for capturing and creating assets, which often does happen if you don't have a designated art department, that your content calendar is being populated, right? And you need to populate it with something cool. So unless your community manager has experience in Perforce or Unreal or its Unity equivalent, in which case you should kiss their feet and never ever let them go, because they can take that in-game engine capture. They're going to need a game build, right? They're going to need a game build that has cheats, that has the ability to remove the UI, that is going to be able to make those assets really great. And so production is the place to go to get that and to provide that to community and update it, frequently with a new hotness. Because often what will happen is production or QA or whoever is playing, checking each milestone, checking each weekly update build. They don't need a build that has no UI. They don't need a build that has cheats in it for the purposes of skipping through content and being able to record things differently, or being able to, change a lot of things. There's different needs between what those departments are using these branches for. So having that connection with production so that they know this is what community is looking for is really important. And then obviously if something goes wrong with that build, you can, let them know. So because you're getting ready for announcement, if the game is to the point where you can record that sort of content and it's ready to go for those first few weeks, it's really important to get that ahead of time, because when you make an announcement, you're going to have to be sharing a lot of content right away, right? So it's important that all the access is available, because you got to prep for that big announcement day. So a bonus to this for production on that side is that community having access to these frequently updated builds that other departments get a preview of allows community to give their expert opinions on future player experience. If your community is to the point where they have been doing this for a long time, and at this point I've launched 9 games, so I'm pretty good about telling you, okay, well, the community is going to have an issue with this particular space in your build today, or this mechanic really isn't fun. Is there a plan to make that different? Or I know they're going to say this. So that sort of expert opinion on future player experience is pretty important. And that elusive element, that fun element, right? The thing that's really tough to classify and impossible to predict, that's something that you can get a little bit of a taste of early on. So, we all know games that are technically flawed, right? But still inherently fun, and vice versa. So I'm looking at you, Mass Effect, when I say this. There's some rigging issues there, right? And some of that, but it's still super fun because the game's amazing. But the idea is to prevent things like that. And the sooner marketing and production know that a certain game aspect is predicted to not be well received by the community, the sooner that they can prepare to focus on that when they do user testing. And it just gives them kind of a heads up. Okay, we need to add this to our user testing idea. Right. So, okay, do provide a playable build. Obviously, we've talked about that. We know why you need to do that. Don't forget to update each other on timeline slips. It's the worst. One of the worst things is when you're getting ready to share something tomorrow about a mechanic, and production will say, "Oh, well, we just changed the lighting for that entire area, and it looks completely different, and it looks so much better, and we really shouldn't show this right now. We need to show it with this better lighting," or etc. So it's important to keep each other updated as early as possible about areas that are going to need a little more polishing. Obviously, too, community at this point, I'm really good at smoke and mirrors. A lot of your community managers are really good at smoke and mirrors. We're not going to reveal things that are, shall we say, in progress, in a way that's going to make them look bad for the community. We know how to frame things. We know how to take some still images and place them in layers and do a bunch of things to make that look better. So that's also on community side to make sure that production looks good in what they're showing right now. So do not ignore red flags on playability and the fun factor stuff. So that's important. Okay, so now we get to the beta or demo. So this is a really big deal, and there's a lot to be learned from this. If having a beta and a demo is a part of your marketing plan, it's even more essential for these two departments to really be working in tandem. So whether it's a simple PC Steam beta, as we're talking about kind of in this discussion, or it's a complicated cross-platform multiplayer, players are going to want to give feedback, right? That's the purpose. They're supposed to play this game, get a feel for it, but also they're going to want to tell you what they think about it. So these tests are an opportunity to massively grow your community while driving them to a specific social platform, and to get their first impressions of the game and what experiences they have, right? Maybe they have negative experiences, maybe they have positive ones, but this is a great time to kind of ascertain that as early as possible. So if you've already begun this task of building a player base, which you have during the announcement phase, your community team can inform production about things like the ideal testing time, right? So if your community has been building and you have a lot of players in Europe, well, then you got to consider the time of day when you're going to open a test if you're having phased testing. So you want to do that during a time when European people are just home from work and they might have time to play versus US people, which is going to be a whole different scenario, right? And a lot of that's going to be like, okay, well, where are your fans located geographically? So, if you have different languages, that's something to consider as well. How many rollouts should occur based on like expected sign-up numbers? If you have people signing up and you want to make sure that everybody gets in, but you want to make sure that these are phased, there's things you can all consider here. And one of the things that's important to you is considering the days that they can play. So weekdays are fine, but weekends are definitely more ideal. So a tip is more weekends are better, obviously, right? So depending on the size of your studio, let's talk a little bit about bugs and feedback. So you may not have a fully equipped QA team. Hopefully you have a wonderful department full of QA people that can handle everything, but you might not have that. A lot of times community will pitch in when it comes to QA. So I'm going to wrap the QA department underneath the banner of production, just for discussing about this, although they may be their own different entire department. So this is a space when you get to this bugs and feedback and these beta tests, this is a space where production can gain a lot of benefits from collaborating with community. And it's also great if that production or QA lead can provide the community department with info, just basic stuff like, okay, where is the location of the save files? We have created a troubleshooting document. If somebody has a crash, here's where your crash dump is. If you have a DX dialog, what is the different versions that we should be looking for? All of that stuff, like great to know to give to community, because we're going to see the same repetitive questions over and over and over, especially if there is a particular bug that is reproducible. Okay, so in turn, the community department should also maintain some kind of a database. A lot of people like Jira. For some reason, production loves Confluence. The production people I've been working with adore Confluence. So, okay, so a document of some sort of the most reported bugs and the most feedback and where those links are to people talking about things specifically where they're reported. Because really, most of this feedback is going to come in from your platform, like I prefer Discord, right? We drive to Discord at the end of a beta. We'll have a little window that pops up and says, oh, come to Discord, tell us all about your feedback. Or you have to go to Discord to get your beta key, in which you're already there. So wherever it's coming from, if it's coming from people just randomly talking in Discord, or if it's coming from a link at the end of your beta where you say, you know, take this survey and tell us about your experience, or report a bug by clicking, you know, F8, whatever. All of that together is going to be funneled into some place that your community department is going to see. So that's all a great thing to do, and feedback that's really important that you don't miss out on. So let's see. Do decide the testing times based on your existing community, and do coordinate QA with community so that you guys make sure that you're working together in tandem in the best way that you can. So another area that we're getting to in the do is that hot fixes, right? As beta tests are often of limited duration, hot fixes are kind of the order of the day. No, it's no fun playing a beta and having, you know, something terribly broken or not being able to complete it because there's a big bug here. So it's not going to be like your usual patches. These are going to be hot fixes that need to be pushed out more regularly, and you know they're just going to be more frequent. So it's important that the development team is agile and can quickly ascertain what's the gameplay blocker here, or what order of priority bugs need to be addressed. So in this case, community is really your frontline responder to that. They're going to be the ones hearing this most often all day long, very similar feedback, all of that. So they can be curating and trying to reproduce bugs and help QA if there are not enough people on board doing that at the time. So a lot of times what I would do when I was kind of short-staffed on QA is get all this together in a doc, and then, you know, once a week or every 3 days, send it to the head of QA or the head of production and say, like, here's the stuff, right? Here's the stuff that's most important. And here's the things we need to address first. So that's important. Let's see. And so getting more specific information, a lot of times QA will come back to community and say, well, I don't understand what happened here. I have a screenshot, I have a description, but I don't know. I need to get more information. So that's important for community to be the in-between person to go back to that player, and you've had this documented carefully so you know where that player is, and you can DM them and say, okay, well, can you tell us more about X? And that's important and helpful to QA because they can then directly ask the questions that might not be clear just from reading someone's report and just seeing a screenshot, right? And also community can help those, we call them special flower people, who basically haven't updated their drivers in a year and are trying to figure out what's going on, and you know, have 1,700 different peripherals that are very specific to their computer. That really isn't about the beta test. It really isn't about your game. It's really just their computer and their system. So you can try to give them a little bit of attention if they have it, because we all know that happens. But community can give production and QA a real-time view of what's urgent and necessary, basically to retain players and prevent bad press, because this is the first time, especially if it's an open beta, that anyone's played your game and they're going to be talking about it. And you want that to be really positive. And even if it's like, okay, well, I was playing this game, there was a lot of bugs, what you want to hear is, oh, the community team was on top of making sure that everything was addressed quickly, and there were patches coming out very quickly, and I felt like I was heard. And that's important for community goodwill. So anyway, production should keep in mind that many things can go wrong in an update, and that's why we don't do them on Friday, right? We never, ever update on a Friday, and we never push them at the end of the day when possible, because what happens, as we all know, is that the developers will go home and production will go home and community will never go home, because they will hear all night long and all weekend long about why this is broken. And we will have to drag our developers back into the office to fix things on a weekend that they don't want to do. So let's just keep that in mind, production. I've had to bring this up several times, just being like, hey, awareness, your community department is going to be forced to work extra hard on a weekend if you push an update, which is fine. We understand that that happens. Community does not sleep. But let's keep that in mind, right, when we're pushing updates. So going back through this, do hotfix urgent issues, even if it's not convenient. So this is not the time that we're waiting for a designated patch, you know, once during the entire beta, etc. We're going to be hotfixing quickly, which is the way that we make sure community stays positive. Stay on top of curating content and the conversation. A community needs to be informing production and QA about the things that are most important that they need to be paying attention to. So do not push updates without sharing patch notes to community. That is also something that happens quite a lot. Production will push an update and then there will be no patch notes or nothing to tell the community. The community manager will find out when the update goes live because the community will say, there's an update. And the community manager will say, oh, no, we don't want to do that. We want to know that there's patch notes ahead of time, with production to share those patch notes. And then the community manager will have to rewrite them in a way that's more understandable for the layman, right? And so then they'll probably put them on Steam or they'll put them in Discord where the patch notes go or wherever. But it's going to require something extra on the part of the community manager. So make sure that you do tell them if there are patch notes. But it's also important that you don't allow the community needs to derail the game completion, because at this point, you're still developing the game, right? And if your development team isn't big, that means a lot of people that need to be working on trying to go for the gold master are going to be stopping to fix a lot of things that are happening in this beta. So it's important for the producer to balance the needs of the game being completed versus the needs of the community playing it at this moment. And sometimes that's tough for community to know, because all we're hearing all day long is that there's some problems and why are they not getting fixed. So it's important for production to express that to community so they understand the whole picture of why things are happening. And also then they can be conveyed to the community. Okay, well, we're trying to complete the game right now. Here's a bug. We understand that we've seen the bug, all of that, right? Okay. So production provides, obviously, we know, the cornerstone of functionality and making sure processes stay on track. However, the main point of making a game is for player enjoyment and hopefully for profit, right? So community will be championing that side. They will be championing they'll be the invisible resource, right? Making sure that that concept is made aware to production, that, these are the people that are going to be playing the game. So we need to make sure that we're focused on that. But also, we need to make sure that things are getting done. So it's very important for the community manager to run any kind of updates through the producer, right? This is the way to build trust, because there's been plenty of times where developers are in whatever platform you're showing that has bug reporting. Developers will start randomly fixing things without any kind of curation, without the producer's sign off, all of that stuff. Or community managers will express that something is happening and developers will get concerned and then just start fixing it. It's really important that the producer takes the lead on all of this and that everything is run through that producer so that timing stays consistent, all of that. So this is where the trust aspect comes in, right? You can't go around, if your community cannot go around to your producer to talk to your developers about this, you need to make sure your producer is running things. Okay, so release date, gameplay trailer. Okay, as the release date approaches, production is going to be, like we said, gunning for that gold master. It's especially important to know the status of what all the community requests are going to be, where bugs are going to be going at that point, so the community knows, okay, we're going to fix this before launch, or this is not going to be fixed before launch, and this will be a patch post-launch. It is not a priority right now. We do hear you, and we've noted it, but it's not going to be fixed right now. So another thing production is really great at and can be helpful, a lot of executive producers have actually had elevator pitches from executive producers on what a game is, how it should be presented to the public, what mechanics do, all that stuff. So production can be a really good resource, surprisingly, for a community who doesn't often think of this, to explain different mechanics in a game if you don't have access to the developers themselves and you can't talk to the game designer, because the community might want to know specific details about percentages to hit, or game design questions, or how this particular thing works in a way that is not necessarily native to your community manager. I that's my long way of saying I'm not a huge turn-based tactical player. So there's going to be a lot of questions about certain games, certain types of games that are going to be really detailed and going to need a lot more information that the community manager might not have or might not be thinking of as a game designer. So they can ask that question of production as well, because usually they have a really good understanding of that as well as game designers. So there you go. So do help the community manager understand complex game design features that they might need a little more detail on. Do decide which bugs and feedback will be addressed before launch. And don't fail to plan for QA launch needs by assigning more personnel, as community will be occupied with marketing needs at launch. So important to think about, hey, guess what? Right now, your community manager is helping you for this beta, everything else. But launch is a whole different thing and a whole different scenario where community manager is going to be really occupied with the marketing parts and the advertising parts, and they will probably not have the same level of focus that they have right now to help you with this beta. So let's talk about this. Launch. So just because a game is launched doesn't mean that the work ends. It's just beginning for community and production and QA in some ways, because players are going to give more feedback, and there's going to be more bugs and more content requests. And for many games, party or character balance is going to come into play here. So hopefully this is something that you've kind of already gotten an idea might be an issue or is hinted at by the community during beta testing. But with a much higher volume of new players, it's going to be quite clear how players feel about various aspects of the game. So if your beta testing was not thorough, this can be kind of a mad scramble at the end to make immediate changes to aspects of a game that have gotten negative feedback and that are affecting your sales and your Metacritic scores with urgency. So I can think of a time or two with a game where a major mechanic was redesigned at launch in the week of launch because players disliked it so much. So in cases like this, where you've got urgent needs, communication is really essential to keep community calm and inform the community that their feedback's being implemented, that you're hearing them, and that there needs to be a very clear internal schedule on when updates might occur and what the immediate priorities for that. So production needs to make that visible to the community department, and the community manager needs to provide documents of responses from players as they come in from that player base. So at that point, let's assume everything's been fixed now, everything's copacetic, everyone's happy, right? If the game does well, which we all hope it does, it's going to be time to consider DLC and begin working towards that. So if you're thinking about that, or if it was part of the initial plan, when you launch the game, that if it does well, then you'd like to expand it in X direction. Community can be a valuable tool knowing what aspects of the game are most popular and could be expanded. So production is going to be interested in creating stages for this and beginning to form milestone plans. And it's also time to consider porting, to other platforms. Usually that's a plan when you launch it on this particular thing. If it does well, you will push it over to here. So that's all production concerns. And tracking those player requests and also people that are not purchasing and why they're not purchasing is really important to do. So it's also a good time to discover maybe additional languages would have been a good choice, and if you want to add them to a port, etc., all that stuff. Okay, so do remain nimble for urgent game blocking updates, obviously. Do inform the community manager what type of data would be most helpful for fixes. So again, reproducing bugs, knowing what exactly is the big problem, important to say. Don't lose track of existing community needs in favor of DLC or platform ports. So while it's easy to, jump into the next big thing, let's not forget that people are playing this now and they need help making sure that is a wonderful experience and that they're going to come back to play it later. So if Dan is willing, Indie Dan, we can never have enough Indie Dan in our life. I would love to take some questions now, and then we'll jump into the second portion.
I love that. If I'm willing.
Yay!
I'm willing.
Willing.
I'm willing. How's it going, Jenesee?
Good.
Amazing.
How are you? Cannot
I'm
have
doing
enough, Dan.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. So here we go. Questions from Discord. How can we improve our communication skills as a team in a small studio?
Okay, other than having endless meetings, and honestly, some days it's like 6 hours of meetings.
Right.
It's just important to know what's going on at any given time. And the thing that I think is the detriment to teams is that when something is changed, that change isn't conveyed, right? So some people love Jira. They love to update every single task on Jira to let everyone know. I personally just have a really hard time looking at Jira and noting that a task has been updated, even if I've been following it. Mm-hmm. So this is why it's important to have interdepartmental meetings. You can have your scrum and you can say okay, what's the thing that happened, today? What's the thing that happened yesterday? That's important. Also, just Slack. It takes 2 seconds for someone in Slack to tell me, oh, guess what? Push deadline, blah, blah, blah. Such and such has changed. And that's good. Your team should want to talk to each other And you don't need like an hour-long meeting to explain that, you know, you're switching order of something. Just Slack someone, it's okay. Or Discord, whatever your plans are. But yes,
Discord is great for sure.
Discord
I mean,
is
it can
great.
get a little unorganized, but you know, there's tools for that. There's an app for that.
There's an app for that, right? Whatever your team likes. I love Notion, like for my internal team, like when I'm running a community team, 5-15 people, I put Notion in there for every single task that I'm working on. And you can also use that for like changes, etc. So Trello,
Indie Game
Notion, all
Business
good.
uses Notion.
Oh, there you go.
Ooh, Notion.
Ooh.
I'm a big fan of Discord though. Okay. Excuse me. From Discord, I'm a one-man team. I don't believe that communication is one of my strong suits. Do you have any recommendations for resources such as videos or articles that can boost my confidence in this area?
Okay, now I have to understand, first of all, your one-man team and your communication is a problem with yourself, or you're trying to communicate with some sort of external partner. Because I thought that was hilarious when I read it. He might not have meant it that way. She,
right.
he.
Maybe I would imagine, like, what if their team is growing, or you know, an external partner?
Got you. Resources on communication. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of YouTube videos that I watch about that. This sort of thing, like right now, you have this conference where I'm telling you, if you like that, if that's how you learn by watching videos and listening, that's good. There are a lot of articles by community managers on this as well. I think Victoria Tran is a great person who writes a lot about this sort of thing. So if you're a reader and that's how you learn, I would read articles about it. Yeah, how do you learn to communicate? I mean, sometimes just asking someone, like, what's the best way for me to share information with you? You know, some people prefer that written. Some people want to hear you. Some people want to see it. Like, ask people what their type of a learning or their type of communication preferences are. I think that's a good start.
I agree. Ask people what they like, and then this, because every place is different. You work for a different company, it's something different. You know, yeah.
Yes.
Learn all the tools. No, don't. That's super overwhelming. Super overwhelming. Okay, another one from Discord. If our community is not providing us with sufficient feedback, what is the appropriate way to engage with them without appearing desperate?
Yes. Okay, so if you're talking to your community on a regular basis, and hopefully you're not just jumping in, I would not recommend just jumping in, asking for a survey, you know, every 3 weeks, or just jumping in saying, what do you think about X every 3 weeks, right? You should be in there building rapport. You should be in there, you know, talking to them about their day. You should be in there just like building a relationship. And once you've built a relationship, you would be surprised at how far goodwill will take you, right? Once your community knows you as a person, and a lot of times I'll even take our developers and I'll do live streams with the developers just so that community can put a face to what you're making and really have a connection with you. So if you're building that connection, asking them for feedback is a lot easier. Also, of course, you can go the bribery route, right? So if you fill out this beta form, you will be entered to win X, or you will get this DLC skin. You know, there's always a bribery route if you cannot do the goodwill aspect. But those are the first two that come to mind for me.
I love that. The bribery route.
Yes, bribery.
That was a mouthful to say, too. Okay. From Discord, I'm thinking about conducting a beta test for my ongoing project, but I'm worried about how I will handle negative feedback without getting discouraged. Can you provide any advice?
Yeah, this is super tough. I mean, that is why you have a community manager, right? I mean, we're the watchers on the wall. We're there with our shield, making sure that we curate what is given by the community in a way that doesn't crush your soul. If this is you, your project, and you're your own community manager, and you're going to ask for that negative feedback, it's really tough to be neutral. So if you have an option to get somebody else to do it, I would. If it's just you and you can't, then yes. I mean, it's one of those things where you're just going to have to really work on not responding immediately when you get that negative feedback, and trying to look at it like a neutral party. Writing it down, you know, making sure that later on you go back to it. Don't think about it in the moment, because it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. Also, your community should be trained, if you're doing it correctly, to not be jerks, right? Like when someone gives feedback, if they're like, you all suck and you should die, like then I've got a problem with my community, because I have not trained them how to speak, you know, in a reasonable manner to me and other people. So when you're getting feedback, if it's really, really evil like that, then that's a problem with your community. But if it's just like hurtful because it's not, you know, praising something that you really love, then that is hard. Yeah, that's really hard.
That's the goes with the don't fall in love with your own ideas, right?
Yeah,
Because you may
yeah,
think they're great, but other people, not everyone is going to, and that's just a
yeah.
hard thing to swallow. When I was going through animation school, right, one of the very
Mhm.
important, you had to give feedback to everybody else, and one of the very important things is that we learned is, you know, you give a compliment and then you give critique, right?
There you
Oh, this
go.
looks really cool, but this one thing, you know, maybe maybe I would change it, or what do you think about this? But not everyone's going to give feedback like that. But through me going through that process for 2 years,
Mhm.
it came to where, like, I feel like I can take criticism pretty well. If somebody doesn't like something, or something that I'm not so emotionally invested in it that, you know,
Okay.
yeah,
That's good.
don't have an emotional response. If you're mad because somebody said something,
Yeah,
don't
don't
respond to them.
respond. Plus,
Just
also, it has to be a numbers game, right? Like, while Judy or Sam has a thought, if there's not 17, 20, 30, 100 Judys saying the same thing, it's one
right.
person's opinion. You need to amalgamate what is the most feedback from that's similar from people, right?
Right. And that's tough. Like, I mean, in a game that could shift your whole
Mm-hmm.
everything, right? Like, if you're like, I want to make a game and I want it to have these features and this, and that's what it's going to do, and then people don't like it, you got to be able to accept that maybe this time this game doesn't need that thing and you need to shift, you know. But then again, getting feedback from people is, as a content creator, this one time many times I did a poll of like, what do you want me to do on this stream? And I got massive amount, like a super high percentage. They wanted me to do this one particular thing. And that was ended up being one of my lowest viewed and interactive streams
Oh.
ever. And so ever since then, I'm like, I'm not listening to anyone. I'm just going to do what I want. Maybe that
Yes.
wasn't a good decision for me.
No. All right, one more
No.
question
Okay.
and then we'll jump back.
Yeah, one more question. Okay. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Let's go with Alina's question here. As an example, what studios have amazing Discords we can check out?
I think Stack Up, if you know Stack Up, they do
Stackup.org.
yeah, they do military. They provide games for military active duty people and also take care of veterans. That is a really intense Discord where I think they do a really good job of community management because they have a lot of people in there that have deep feels, right? And they take care of them in a good way. So if you're looking for how to be empathetic or how to deal with people that are struggling, that's a good one to go to. Let me
And
think.
that's for a charity Discord. Like, charity Discords, most of the time people come during an event and then they leave. But with
Mhm.
Stack Up, people hang out there continually and is continually active, which is amazing. That's unheard of in charity Discord.
There you go. Okay, so if we can jump back in, and then we'll
I
hopefully
guess
have
I'll
some
let
time at the
you.
end.
I guess
Oh,
I'll
thank
let
you.
you. All right. Then I'll back out and then we'll finish up.
Okay, yay.
Or, and then if there's still more questions.
We'll
So
see if we have time. I'm
if we
actually going
got
longer than I
time,
thought.
then you'll get your questions. And if not, Jenesee maybe will be in the
I will be
Discord later.
around. I'll be around in
Jenesee will be
Discord.
around.
I will. Okay, so now we're going to do the marketing department, similar to how we did the production department. So we have the same sorts of things, right? The announcement, the beta, the release, the launch. And when making a game, there's usually a project lead, and most often this is the marketer for that game. And this person's going to be the contact usually for PR, for the production department, QA, community. All of those people are responsible for the departments, but the accountability for the entire project is going to belong with this individual. So the place to find out about external communications like PR, etc., and having a close relationship between community and marketing is a good thing for you if you're going to do this. So let's talk about. Okay, there's a lot of subjects when it comes to the announcement. So I'm just going to show you the subjects and we're going to jump to the do's and don'ts. Here we go. All right. So the announcement, a lot of things are going to go into this with marketing, a lot more than probably for production for certain. So each game brings different collaboration needs, beginning right from the moment that a game approaches the announcement. So branding is one of those things that really needs to be considered carefully. What's the overall look of the materials to promote the game? What will that be? What fonts, colors, do's, don'ts for character placement, all that are going to be needed. And many times these decisions are made in marketing. My little personal caveat here is oftentimes these are made without the consultation of the art or community department. This is an unwise decision because these two places have a lot to contribute on the right way to design well and how to engage the community and to present the game. So my recommendation is not to keep this internal. Do not ignore the resource of your art department and your community department when making these decisions, because key art is usually the first piece that embodies this vision. And it's often outsourced too, and usually not even seen by the internal artists of your company. So I can't tell you how long I've had to advocate for this particular thing, because there was a point where things switched. I think in Steam, for the different sizes for your little preview windows of things, right? And even if people wanted to do things in Twitch, right? So everything was always a 16:9 key art. And that was very frustrating when you're trying to apply things to consoles, or you're trying to apply things to Twitch, or to Steam's new guidelines for all of this stuff. So it's really important to know what you're going to be using your key art for and where it's going to be needed. And that's something that you can use and tap your community and your art team for, so that you can make sure that your key art is created in vertical format, as well as your 16:9, and some of the odd formats that are really needed for console pages, which are just not native and are really tough to change. Also, art departments complain a lot because there's many characters crammed into a small, square key art that is going to end up on mobile and be unreadable. So it's important to consider sensibilities of those two departments when you're creating the key art. And even though marketing is kind of running the show when it comes to that. So tone of voice, social tone of voice and guidelines are going to be created. This is the time to do that. And it's important that marketing weighs in on what the community is doing here. This way, everyone's aligned on the way the game should be presented and how it's going to speak to players. It often narrows down subject matter that community and social channels will post about, and it can also reassure any game partners that might be stakeholders in this, and that kind of lets them know that the team's mindful of these political pitfalls. So it's the time to consider, what subjects will the brand talk about, and what will it and won't it address? How funny, like serious, snarky, what's the tone? And how's that gonna reflect to players that are already talking about the genre? So what restrictions on retweets or shares in the community are you gonna put in place? So that's especially important, especially for large stakeholders. For instance, working with MGM was a very different experience on these types of tone of voice and how do's and don'ts documents than working with our in-house game studio, obviously. So this is the time that's going to be created, and it's important for marketing to know what community's doing when they're creating that, and they should weigh in. So this is a good point for collaboration. Content reveals. This is a really important thing. So when it comes to marketing, every single aspect and asset of the game is a potential selling point. So it's really important to make sure that the community department is clear on the timing of those reveals to avoid spoilers, especially when they're chatting with future players, right? So parallel messaging is really important to remove embarrassing walkbacks that might have to happen if the community has unmet expectations because you've inadvertently revealed something that isn't going to be able to be done because of technical reasons, or it's a spoiler for something that was meant to be used in a trailer later. So it's really important to work with the marketing department to know between community and marketing exactly what is going to be shown at which time, because there's a lot of things that you're going to be using for exclusives for different press sites to kind of like lure them into doing things for you. There's going to be things that are in trailers that are like a big surprise. You need to know all of that to keep the hype going. However, when you're working community, and especially if there's 6 months plus between the point of announcement and the point of launch, you're going to need some cool stuff to tease your community with, because if you just put things out and all you're doing is regurgitating what's on Twitter or regurgitating what's in Instagram, that's not really helpful. It's not a reason for someone to come to a community channel. They should have reasons, and those reasons are usually interacting with the community managers there, who are going to give them a little taste of something they're not going to get elsewhere. This is the reason to make that platform important. So knowing, okay, well, I have these parts of the game that are not going to be used in any kind of reveals, and I can tease them out and make weeks and weeks of them guessing what this is and kind of talk about this. And that gives me special stuff that I can share with just this platform, and a reason for them to come is really important. So that keeps the hype going. Important. Okay, So remember how we talked about production, providing that roadmap for areas of the game and what's going to get done first and ready to be shown first. So marketing also has a similar map probably in their marketing plan, which is how PR, press, and influencers will be engaged along the way. So this also has to be incorporated into the community plan, at least in placeholder form, so that you know, okay, there's some big thing happening at this time. And so you should be aware of it. And you should be watching for it. So it's extremely important to include your community manager in your PR calls, which I think is a little bit, I don't know, innovative to some companies. They don't always have the community manager in their PR calls, but they should, because a lot of times things are decided in PR calls, especially on timing or different sites, etc., that are really need to be conveyed to the community manager. And we cannot have your marketing manager spending all day on Slack or Discord just updating the community manager, because that's what they would be doing all day long. Especially when it comes to biz dev deals, right? So anyway, community marketing always have eyes on Google Alerts, right? If there's something being covered about the game, all that stuff. But it's important, again, to be aware of all the PR things that are going to come up. And they can be extremely variable. So unless you have an exclusive agreement with a certain website, certain, article is going to come out on Game of Sutra. It's going to come out on, IGN. It's going to come out this time. This is exclusivity. It's going to come out exclusive for an hour. Unless you know that particular thing, most of the time you don't know when somebody's going to publish an article about your game. You just know it's coming out sometime, right? So it's important to have those PR calls where you know, okay, this is a list of the sites that are going to talk about us at some point in the next 3 days. We're going to have an article about it. And then you can all be looking for it together. So that's really cool. So you want to make sure that each partner, especially the priority people, if IGN is publishing something about your game, you want to make sure you give them a shout out and you make sure all of those things. So especially knowing the priority of which particular sites are going to be publishing something about our game, which are the ones we really, really need to make sure that we, give a handshake to, that's important to know. Now, especially if you have those exclusivity deals where, this is going to come out an hour before anyone's allowed to talk about it. It's a little bit tricky because you want to put an announcement out on your own channels. It's your game, right? But you can't until this other thing has come out. So it's something that requires extra thinking, and it's something to know ahead of time, especially for your community department, so they can think about how exactly they want to handle an announcement about something that they're doing after someone else announces it. So important to think about. So let's see, do include your community and art team for feedback, especially on key art and things of that nature. Do collaborate on tone of voice and social do's and don'ts. Do share information on content reveal plans, and do keep community in the loop on biz dev deals. So biz dev deals, there are times where you will announce in your announcement trailer that the game is coming out on PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and PC, right? But you're not announcing the timing of that, and we're just in the announcement phase. If it is a possibility that you will be looking for an exclusivity deal with a platform, and you're talking to Sony, and you're saying, in the background, your biz dev team is talking to Sony, and if they can get this deal, it's going to be a PlayStation exclusive for 6 months. That is really important for your community manager to know ahead of time, because the community will assume that there is going to be a simultaneous launch across all announced platforms for a game. And they will be bitterly disappointed to learn that their favorite platform has to wait 6 months for them to play a game that has been hyped for a long time in the announcement because you did not know. So that is going to be one of the questions your community is going to ask right away. Is this simultaneous launch? And usually the answer is yes. But it's important to know that that might not be true right away. So you can just say, there's no news on that, or you can say something else rather than confirming something and then having to walk that back later. Anyway, so allow your community manager to diffuse those situations that might arise by clear communication ahead of time, so that the community, when it's being populated and when it's being grown, knows this already in your FAQ. So that is the keep you in the loop on the biz dev deal aspect. Don't exclude the community manager from relevant PR meetings. Don't change existing public info without consulting the community manager. So obviously delays happen, things happen. But if you've already, and we'll get to this when we get to the release date, right? It's really important when you've confirmed something that it stays confirmed. And we're not talking about release date. We're just talking about little things like, okay, this is going to be in the game, or this particular, like we just talked about, platform is going to be released at the same time. Like all of that is really important to keep consistent. So knowing ahead of time, like these things will not change, these things could change by the marketing manager to community is a really important discussion to have. All right, so we're going to go beta demo. And we're going to go really quick because we only have like a few minutes left. So when producers are handling technical aspects of these tests with QA, they can listen to that feedback. But it's really important for marketing to survey existing community, to dig into areas that marketing is most interested in and drive players to the platforms that are performing the best. And this is also a great time for beta and demo to activate influencers and show some people that, this is how much fun people are having with this game. And they're going to have a great time when they do it too. So skipping quickly to release date and gameplay trailer. This is a high stress point for marketers, one of the most high stress points you can have as they try to get to this gold master and all that stuff. So right now, the community has not seen any aspects of the game except in-engine aspects. So they really want to know what it's going to be like to go on. So this is where you're going to have a lot of people's feedback, and the community resources are going to come into this. So we need to know, let's see, we need to know that there's more options than a 2-minute trailer, that there's a 30-second trailer for ads and a 30-second trailer because the community doesn't have 2 minutes of focus. So it's important that the marketer provides community with a full trailer with all the SFX and everything so they can cut it into areas. All right, we're going to go to launch. Okay, clear tasking. There's so many things that have to happen at a launch, and everybody has to do different things. It's really important that everyone knows exactly what they're doing on that day. Who's pushing the button for things to go live on YouTube? Who is going to be sharing the trailer? What's going to be happening exclusivity? All of those things. It's really important that there's very clear communication on how that's going to go. There's going to be quick turnarounds that you're going to have to be curating all the feedback and info bombing that the community is going to do. There should be a document that you're sharing all of you together. Influencers is going to be happening, and it's really good to have a list. That's why you're part of that PR discussion, so that you can jump into influencer streams, tell them thank you for everything that they're doing, and just really love on them. So summary, hopefully listening to all this, you can see how these 3 departments work together. We can definitely expand on marketing. I kind of rushed through that a lot, but hopefully you can see why it's really important not to silo your different departments. Yay!
Yay, that was awesome. Thank you. And I would like to call out Buddy the Elf. For being a guest on the stream.
Okay, nice. Thank you, Buddy the Elf.
Did you? Okay. Well, you put him in he was in your presentation.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, Buddy the Elf, and then
yes, Buddy the Elf for my question time. Yes. I thought it'd be more fun to have exciting puzzle pieces. So there you go.
Those were awesome. What this was amazing and super helpful.
Yay.
Are you going to hang out in the Discord a little bit if anybody?
Yes.
Okay, so you can go to the pod. What is it called? After podcast post.
Is there a channel there?
Post session chat is in the Discord. And if anybody wants to go in there, it's discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. Oh, that's the wrong one.
Oh, look at
that. Join the Indie Game Business Discord. It's coming. Here it comes. Discord.gg/ guess what? Indie Game Business. We made it so easy for you. Thank you so much. We've got, who do we got coming up next here? We've got how to avoid a bad Steam score through. Guess what? Play testing. This is going to be amazing.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Yes. And then there's a post right there. Get ready to unlock a whole new world of expert advice and an incredibly welcoming community by joining the IGB Discord today. And there's a link. And guess what? We have over 5,000 members of our Discord now.
Ooh, congrats.
All right. Thank you so much.